Graffiti, from signatures scrawled on walls to illegal spray can art, costs Britain an estimated £100 million a year to remove. The people who do it are part of a subculture which sees breaking the law as a form of self-expression. The law has now decided to bite back. The British Transport Police has developed a national policy designed to lead to the mass prosecution of offenders. That policy aims to force the subculture onto the right side of the law. Tonight we ask whether a movement that feeds on breaking the law can be brought to heel through prosecution. Where should we be drawing the line? The graffiti culture is a borrowed culture. It first appeared on the side of New York subway trains 15 years ago. The painters were young, male, and determined to show they were beyond the reach of authority. As the paint spread, so did the culture. Soon, handball courts in every large city in the state were covered with paintings by the good and the bare signatures or tags of the not-so-good. The problem proved almost uncontainable, and as it grew, so did the outrage of people confronted with an alien culture. In the early 80s, graffiti crossed the Atlantic and started appearing on British walls. Again, the writers were young men determined to show the law couldn't stop them, even if it could reach them. Inky from Bristol, who's given up illegal work, was one of the first painters. But while superficially similar to its American neighbour, the roots of the British culture were very different.
If people remember that the beginning of the 1980s was well known for its urban street riot in places like Bristol, St Paul's, in Brixton and in Moss Side. That was seen at the time, in the media certainly, to be a young black phenomenon, but it was in fact a mix of young black and white styles of urban protest. And the graffiti that we now see, both legal and illegal, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, is really a product of the mixing of those styles at the beginning of the decade.
Bristol was one of the city's first and worst affected. A tight-knit group painted dozens of murals a month. The prolific Robert Del Nair was the first artist in the country arrested, and his work is still regarded by many as the best.
First time went out was a bit of a joke. It was a pretty pathetic painting. Spent most of the time running away from passing cars and, dodging behind walls and, this and that. And, the paint dripped. Disgusting, really. But I mean, like, no matter how many times you practice and work out in advance how you're going to do it and how to use the spray can on the night, it's a completely different thing. It does what it wants. It's terrific. It'll go crazy. And you've got one chance to do everything. You have to make everything count. Every line has to be, perfect, spot on, bang, bang, bang. You can't rub out and start again. That's one of the most frightening things. It's probably the biggest fear, rather than getting arrested. Actually, the whole thing about doing it was if you messed up, everyone was going to see it. It's a complete, that was the fear.
But did a night in the cell stop him painting?
You don't feel the police are looking for you after you've been arrested once. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you've probably gone home and ain't never going to do it again. But the first time I went out after being arrested was pretty frightening, en route to the destination and then getting there and looking up at the wall with a blank canvas or whatever and thinking, I've got to spend 4 hours here. If I'm going to do a painting, it's going to take me 4 hours. You have to commit yourself to that. That's frightening, because, you can't just walk off after 2 hours and think I'll finish it off later. I believe I have to finish a piece of work at that. I'd rather get arrested than do that.
For the police, the appearance of a durable graffiti culture presented them with a new problem. Officers had always been able to disregard random scrawlings to concentrate on more serious crimes. But brash murals were an open taunt. a public flouting of the law that was impossible to ignore. Railway property was the worst hit, and the British Transport Police concede they simply didn't know how to tackle the sprayers.
At the time, we caught the odd one or two people actually in the act. It's extremely difficult to actually catch people doing it. I mean, if you don't catch them doing it, trying to get the evidence together for individuals is rather difficult. Say one or two were caught by police officers on patrol in uniform, others in plain clothes. None were actually identified on their tags there and then, so it was very much a hit-and-miss affair.
But while convictions may have been sporadic, they did happen, and attracted attention as the first of their kind. That attention led to a backlash that surprised the sprayers and dismayed the police. It was the appearance of the tagger, a copycat whose only creation is his signature. As 100 tags take less time than the most basic painting, the city subways became a tagger's roll call. This is Britain's most popular and expensive form of criminal damage. It's always practiced where it'll be most noticed. But why do some of the best painters, like Inky, who's now given it up, also tag?
You got the sort of gangster sort of image at first when you first get into it, and then you get into the drawing side of it as well after that, really. Because it illegally running from the police and sort of, they can draw you into it quite easily. Tagging is like a uniform language to all graffiti artists, where you got certain shapes and letters. It can be anything from the simplest scrawl to the most complex, like sort of typography, calligraphy style thing on the wall. The more complex it is basically, it's like the better you are as a writer, the more complex you can do a tag.
You've already got the you've got to respect that there, don't you?
But however complex a tag is, it's still basic compared to a painting. And by working with taggers, artists like Inky admit they're enjoying the respect of the peer group they motivate.
Criminologists over the years have argued that it is a relatively inoffensive part of youth culture, and even though it is illegal in many cases, it should be left to really go away, and that if you police it, as it was policed in many aspects of the 1980s, it really would make it worse as a problem. It's a classic case of there being a kind of moral panic, which was also obvious in the media as well as in police reaction.
As the graffiti culture spread across Bristol, Avon County Council tried an experiment they hoped could turn criminal damage into art. They set up the Aerosol Arts Project in Barton Hill. It became a legal meeting place for sprayers, who used the walls of the youth club as a place to exchange and practice ideas.
The aim of the Aerosol project was to provide and offer legal provisions for aerosol artists in Bristol, and the project's aims was to bring in all those young people, as humanly possible obviously, that were working illegally in and around Bristol to this site where there was paint available and wall space for them, and try to show them that aerosol art could be a positive outlet.
But as the sprayers focused on Barton Hill, so did the law. The British Transport Police began surveillance of the youth club. 5 officers worked for a year, photographing tags on illegal paintings and matching them up with murals at Barton Hill. It was the beginning of Operation Anderson.
From a police point of view, we have very few options open to us. I mean, whilst individually we might like to encourage them to work elsewhere, if offences are reported to us, obviously we have to respond to that. And I think if the same situation appears again, we would probably take a similar course of action.
The police have a number of options when they attempt to control this sort of behaviour. They can prosecute for serious offences, they can prosecute for relatively low-level offences, for minor offences, and they can also not prosecute at all. They don't necessarily have to use the criminal law in this way. They have a fairly wide discretion. And I think one of the questions here is whether, as some criminologists have suggested, that vandalism of this kind can be perhaps channeled in different ways, in more expressive ways.
On the 12th of July 1989, the British Transport Police raided the houses of the 12 sprayers and taggers they were certain they could convict.
It's all the worst things going around, especially when we actually got to go into the court and stand on the top.
Come this way, please, sir.
Especially for what we actually did, it wasn't really that. The way they treated us was as if we were some big bank robbers or something.
Would you like to take a seat over there, please? Okay, sit down. Okay, I'd like to give you this notice as to why you've been detained at the police station. Just point out to you, they have the right to have someone informed of your arrest. You have the right to consult a solicitor. And you have a right to consult a copy of the codes of practice. And you can do this now or any time during the interview. Okay? I'll give you that notice there. Right, if we can just start then on the interview.
They seized sackloads of spray cans, marker pens and design books. But the most important thing they seized was a diary which contained the telephone numbers of nearly 50 sprayers. Over the next 2 weeks, they were arrested in the biggest ever haul of graffiti artists and equipment.
We had a large number of offences committed all over the city, a large number committed on the railway stations and on trains. We'd amassed a terrific amount of evidence, but it all had to be pieced together and documented, and evidence against all the individuals had to be carefully examined to make sure that we had sufficient evidence to proceed against the individuals.
Cataloguing an unexpected mass of evidence was difficult. So difficult that the chief prosecuting solicitor had to spend 2 weeks sorting it himself.
Very conclusive evidence, isn't it? Yeah. This is really good stuff, isn't it? It's quite nice, isn't it?
Yes, all the rubbish you see just on the side of the building.
Defence solicitors believe confusion over the evidence all but crippled the police case. They say that's why the Crown Prosecution Service asked for a more straightforward mass trial. Bristol magistrates turned them down and tried all but 5 cases themselves.
That they were trying to prove some grand type of conspiracy. They then found out that the evidence that they had certainly wasn't sufficient for anything like that and had to think again. But it took them a long time to actually reach that stage. It went through most of the magistrates' court proceedings, as I recall. They were all linked up together in one big bunch, which made it very, very difficult to actually isolate each defendant, what each defendant was supposed to have done.
Each of the 46 sprayers convicted over the next 6 months was found guilty of less serious charges than the police had brought. Their fines ranged from £20 to £2,000. The last and most serious case to come to court was youth leader John Nations. The police alleged he'd organised all those convicted. Nation says he expected the prosecution.
I knew that I would come into contact with the police because of the fact that this site had tags that appeared on it, that appeared on illegal work outside, and obviously the police formed a link between myself and the project here and work that was going on illegally. But obviously, if I was to attract those young people from a legal nature to this project, it obviously meant that I knew that they had been involved in illegal acts. So obviously I held information that the police obviously felt I could assist them with in their investigation.
After unprecedented delays, the Crown Prosecution Service settled for a deal instead of a conviction. John Nation was found not guilty, but agreed to be bound over to keep the peace for a year.
Going to give that money towards the project, or the painter's going to want that money for themselves.
There's been a substantial decrease in the amount of graffiti that has actually been made. Certain areas have been cleaned up and they haven't been marked up subsequently. So yes, I think it was a success. That doesn't mean to say that we're complacent and it could rear up again very quickly, but I do believe that the people that were involved in it have had a sort of rather short, sharp shock in being caught and taken to court.
You could just drive the problem back out onto the street, which is what the police say they're actually trying to stop, the problem of graffiti aerosol art in the community. Well, if you take away the facility of the legal sites, many of which have been organised by Barton Hill and John Nation, then you're right back to the start.
But did the prosecution stop illegal work appearing? The work that appeared on the walls of this warehouse says not. Many of the convicted taggers and artists have reoffended, and new painters are replacing those who've given up illegal work. Both those who've gone straight and those who haven't say the intensity of the police operation has invigorated the illegal culture. They say that by being criminalised, it's been glamorised.
Well, now there's more like street tagging and stuff than there has been at any time before. I usually just go and look at like the bus stops and like the buses going past and see that they're all plastered. But at the moment people see Bristol as one of the top places just because of the big bus. And it's as if like your place is really good for graffiti. You've been busted, like, and so, like I said, like advertising the problem. It means that people actually use up tourist attractions sort of thing. You get people actually coming to the area for the graffiti.
The problem is, in many ways, a matter of a conflict between the criminal law authorities, the police of various kinds, and youth. And this is a more general problem of policing of youth and youth culture across the country, which is often handled in a very heavy-handed way. And there are lots of other examples of this. Acid house movement at the moment, which is being policed with a fairly strict legal clampdown. There's another example where you may well say that hardline policing and hardline law and order policy has actually exacerbated the problem, not solved it.
These officers at Tadworth Transport Police headquarters near London are being taught Bristol fashion. The plainclothes instructor plays the part of an escaping tagger.
There's a big problem in the train when you buy a ticket before you come on the platform. And you don't go right on train. Just take your name.
What did you have? Trespass. That was all.
When their training is complete and these officers return to their regions, they will help to apply the lessons of the Bristol operation nationally. The decision to create a national hardline policy was taken at a seminar of senior officers after Operation Anderson.
The more information you get from the House, the more information you can give to the local intelligence officer who can then circulate it. You may well have gone off the patch and gone elsewhere. You can check out the computer. That's the sort of stuff we're looking for. Not only when we search them at the scene, but later on, if you do get a chance to search their houses. What else would you be looking for then, maybe when you get to the house?
Quite a lot of them also have their tags, and they do it in their own home as well, so you can marry up the tags. I've seen a few. That's my name as well.
Thank you.
The reason the British Transport Police is able to transform regional experiments into national policies is because of its unique structure. Funded by the Home Office and British Rail, it only has one chief constable, and therefore only has one set of policies which can be quickly introduced and changed. Because those policies are national, they have a wide impact. They're often copied by other forces after being introduced by the Transport Police.
quite nice, some of them. I like that sort of thing. So we put the information out then to Bristol, to Cardiff, to Plymouth, various other places, and they've all had successful operations there. Cardiff and South Wales had a substantial number in also. It all originated from the job at Bristol.
What is interesting, I think, is the comparison between this sort of phenomenon and, say, football hooliganism. British Transport Police have been very much at the forefront of combating football hooliganism and vandalism over the last 20 or 30 years, and it has been up to the other police forces to take over their role in many cases. In the case of football hooliganism, a National Football Intelligence Unit was set up to take over much of what the role of the British Transport Police had been in the 1970s and 80s. Now, in the case of graffiti, the British Transport Police are very much in the forefront again.
The people at the forefront of the graffiti culture are the Bristol Sprayers. At this festival of legal street art in Manchester, Inky gives a demonstration of the other Bristol fashion to graffiti crews from around the country. But being fashionable also means being photographed by officers from the Northern Graffiti Squad. Working with officers from Bristol, it's instigated the largest campaign since Operation Anderson. But out of notoriety and fame has come profit. Inky is one of several artists who earn up to £1,000 for commissions, painting anything from nightclubs in Bristol to canal boats in Amsterdam, work they say has materialised since they were prosecuted. But those same artists remain loyal to Barton Hill. They contribute a percentage of their profits to help younger sprayers. Don Nason says it's their form of crime prevention.
I think if the police use the investigation tactics that they used in Bristol on a national level, I still don't think they'll actually solve the illegal aspect of what is materialising in this country. Because those young people that are working illegally in other parts of the country, the vast majority of them have not got the opportunity to paint in a legitimate site like this one here in Bristol. Other cities like Manchester, Liverpool, and a lot of other cities around the country, they've got no legal wall space or providence for understanding coming from, whether it be youth workers, probation officers, whatever. So all that occurs is that those young people have the images of illegal work being reinforced time after time, so there's no opportunity or even an offer to channel their activities.
Here, John Nason tries to guide children at Bath Summerfield Special School in the right direction. It's part of a series of visits to schools by Barton Hill artists. These children normally have an attention span of around 20 minutes. Legal painter Jody occupied them for 3 hours. While sessions like this are unlikely to create artists, the hope is that they'll stop young people becoming taggers and ending up in court. Jody has never worked illegally, but believes she owes a debt to those who did.
I mean, these kids that have gone out and sort of worked illegally, there's not been accepted in art form, but they've pulled it in off of the street into places like this, which is obviously a good thing. I think they should deserve more respect for it.
So could the threat of more arrests or the financial benefits of going straight bring the rest of Bristol's maverick sprayers onto the right side of the law? It was work by some of these sprayers which made Bristol graffiti famous. Shab was one of the most prolific. The one sprayer never caught by the transport police, he maintains an elusive lifestyle.
To me, it's a love. It's my first love, painting. From anything else there is, I do. I just love painting. It's a real passion for me. I can't see myself doing anything else. It's no hobby anymore. It's my life. When I do a piece, I take everything there is in life to account. not just some people look to other pieces of art like sculpture and like fine paintings and abstracts, but I look to the whole of life, to people, to emotions, to animals, to everything there is, and how everything gets on with each other within life.
Well, I think the policy to adopt a hard line or a firm line by prosecuting, not only in Bristol but elsewhere, is working. In Bristol, we've seen it work, and the national trend is to take a firm line by prosecuting. I mean, they are committing criminal offences. Whilst we're sympathetic to them having facilities, our attitude is they are committing criminal offences, and we will take a hard line. We will arrest people, we will report people, and we will put them before the court.
The Transport Police argue that a national hardline policy is cheap compared to the cost of removing graffiti. Even so, it's anxious to avoid a repeat of the more embarrassing aspects of Operation Anderson. Lawyers from the Bristol Crown Prosecution Service will now lecture at Tadworth, and evidence will be processed into a book for magistrates and juries to examine.
So much the cleaning off is expensive.
It's definitely a selfish thing to do, to paint on an outside wall which is probably not your property and stick it there for everyone to look at with no choice. But I think that sums up, and it's kind of part of the environment we live in, part of the city we live in. It's a selfish place. You feel no kind of link with what you see around you. There's no human stamp on it. It's just office, commercial business. And so that is part of the need to actually put something on there, paint your own face on the walls, you know, and like, that was really what it was about, have a good time and do that.
Certainly evidence on a national scale that there is now a police culture and a youth culture which are integrally opposed to each other. In the case of acid house scene, football hooliganism and in graffiti, what you have is two cultures which are very much opposed to each other, but also which have similarities. They are both cultures of machismo in many ways. They're very male cultures. And what needs to be done to some extent is to break down that maleness for them to be able to resist each other, but in less strident fashion. And in some ways, if you had less prosecution-minded police and more tolerant youth cultures, something may happen.
So, as a sporadic conflict hangs on the edge of becoming a national confrontation, will illegal graffiti be policed out of existence? Or will a more consistent form of policing simply lead to a more persistent conflict? Either way, both sides accept that the line of conflict between dissatisfied youth and authority runs deeper than graffiti.
Even the tags can look quite nice when they're done big.
One of them probably, yeah.
See someone's already graffitied over the top of it. It's safe to try and do it.
You trouble, pal, now? Yeah. Okay, any complaints you've got, you can make to the custody officer. Yeah, have you got the car outside? Oh, dear. It's going to be complaining again.